All right, my guest today is a certified farmer. He farms everything that you can imagine in this world, from rice farming, beans farming, maize farming, piggery, cattle ranching, everything that you can imagine. In fact, we're planning to give him the award of the most intelligent, the best farmer in the world. My guest today is the president of Nigerian Farmers Group Cooperative Society, Rexon Cheleke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
All right.
It's my studio.
Yes. Before we dwell into everything that has to do with farming, President Bola Tinubu just announced his plan for food security. That means he declared an emergency or a state of emergency on food security in the nation. Let's start from when President Bola Tinubu became the president of this nation, from his speech so far, from the steps he has taken. What will you say about the steps he has taken, his appointments, and some other things he has done?
Well, it's a good thing that we have declared an emergency on food security. Because what needs to happen is that we must make food security a national security issue. Why am I saying this? Currently, the challenge you have in Nigeria is that rural Nigeria, that is a good mine, has become a landmine. Insecurity has bedeviled most of rural Nigeria. So yes, there needed to be an emergency on food production. Why? Because something drastic has to happen. You cannot have a population of 200 million people, average age of 19 years old. You cannot have over 70 million farmland, and about 40 million of that arable. You cannot have all of these factors of production aligned favorably in your case and still be hungry. So very poor decisions have been made. Very Abuja-centric decisions have been made over the years. So something has to change. So declaring an emergency on food security is the first start. The question therefore becomes, is this emergency different from the many emergencies that have been declared in the food sectors over the years? Operation Feed the Nation. It is time to feed Nigeria. Vision 2010, Vision 2020, Vision 2050. Are they different? So you need to begin to look at it holistically. So you are not just talking about an emergency for emergency's sake, but an emergency that is targeted towards real food production. So it is time. It is actually late, but it's better late than never.
Probably this is why one of the steps that this administration wants to take is that to put matters of food and water availability and affordability within the purview of National Security Council.
I wonder why it has not been in the purview of National Security Council all this while in the first place. Look, water is a source of life to not just man, but animal and crop. If you look at rural Nigeria, one of the biggest challenges we have had with regards to agricultural production in Nigeria is the fact that we mostly farm during the rainy season. And when there is massive flood, our farms suffer. So what do you need to do? You need to have a national water policy that looks at all of these challenges that the farmers are facing. And if you look at it as a national farming policy, national water policy, then you must also look at it also as a national agricultural policy. And what is the aim? Sometimes you do very, very simple things become very complex to people who are not serious about their real national development opportunities. Why don't we have mini dams across this country in places where once the rain stops, farming stops? Why don't you have mini dams that begin to harvest rainwater during the rainy season and warehouse that rainwater during the dry season so that local communities can actually farm all year round? That is your solution number one. So Like what President Muhammad Buhari did, and I've said it in several fora, that what the emergency you are seeing, a lot of it is taken from the progress that the last president made under the APC. Buhari reactivated so many of our dams across the country. The question is, after reactivating all these dams, what were done with those dams? So, not just reactivating dams, not just a national water policy, but what are you going to do with those dams and with that policy that ensures that the farmer continue to farm? So, putting it under the National Security Council gives it more urgency, gives it more desire for something to be done about it drastically and urgently. But then, like I said, have we not done it before? Why did it fail? Those are the questions that should be asked. So, yes, it's good. It's good to put them there. But then, please, let there be a political will to follow through this time. That's what Nigerian farmers are saying, nothing else.
The government has drafted a memorandum of partnership with stakeholders in the agri sector. I don't know if you are aware that the government said it will release fertilizers, grains to farmers and household grains. I think for households it will take urgent, there will be an urgent synergy between the Ministry of Agriculture and that of Water Resources to ensure adequate irrigation for farmers to guarantee an all year round farming. I don't know. What else do you think is missing, or do you think all these things, these two things I mentioned, are achievable?
The question is, why was it that what has been done before has not worked? I honestly don't believe in that part of the
memorandum.
The memorandum, yes. The reason is simple. Look, we should stop funding political agricultural associations and start funding real farming associations, and most of them are in rural Nigeria. So when you talk about stakeholders, the question you ask is, the Anchor Borrowers Program was managed by stakeholders, right? And trillions wasted and cannot be repaid. So what needs to happen is we need to move interventions away from urban-driven agricultural associations to rural active agricultural associations. What am I saying? It is time that the federal government begin to manage interventions from the local governments. And you can say, okay, from the local government, the politicians will take it. But then, set up institutions and structures that are able to monitor those processes. And let me give you a very clear example. For example, you were talking about, before this emergency, you had the 500 billion intervention for what? Because of fuel subsidy, right? Why are you giving people 8,000 naira, the very vulnerable Nigeria 8,000 naira, to be able to what? To survive every month? Why don't you create demand and incentivize palliatives? E.g., go to rural Nigeria, engage 15 million poor Nigerians, and the only demand from you to them is plant in places where you have that coconut does well. Plant 10 coconuts. I'll be paying you 15,000 naira every month to maintain the 10 coconuts. Okay? So 15,000 naira gives you something in the pocket, but something to also what? Look after the coconut. Do that for 15 million Nigerians. How many coconuts do you think you're going to have? 150 million coconuts will be planted, and then you maintain them over a period of 5 to 7 years. Make sure that a palliative is available for the next 5 years. What do you think is going to happen? At the end of the palliative, you're going to have 150 million coconuts, or 150 million palm trees, or 150 million mangoes. So all you need to do is to build processing plants that begin to do what? Create industries out of your palliatives. But by the time you give people 80,000 that has no demand, what do you think is going to happen? There is not going to be any productive effect at the end of 5 years, or at the end of 1 year, or at the end of 8 years. So palliatives must be different. It is the same context that we're talking about, what is just about with regard to stakeholders. Go to the rural communities. In Gati, Nasarawa State, for example, Kokona local government, we have need for tractors. We have need for farm tools. Come to that local government and say, okay, in Kokona local government, we know that you don't have tractors. We know that you don't have this. We are going to buy 10 tractors for Kokona local government. So if you spend 100 million in Kokona local government and there are tractors, what have you done? You have actually enhanced the capacity of the local farmers to do what? To farm. Because those tractors in Kokona local government becomes free tractors for all of the farmers in Kokona local government to utilize. That is how intervention becomes effective. That is how intervention becomes progressive. That is how intervention becomes productive. But when you call stakeholders who have mismanaged interventions over the years, over decades, and you still give them the same intervention, you are still going to have the same result. So like I said, fertilizer, fantastic. But why is the price of fertilizer still above, hovering between 25 to 50,000 when President Muhammadu Buhari supported so many blending plants across the country? It is because you are using the private sector that don't have any insight to agriculture, that don't know what rural Nigeria looks like, that have not been to rural Nigeria before, that sits in ACs, that drives with healers, that the first time you give them intervention, the first thing they do is to buy healers, and buy G-Wagon, and buy Prado. Every government agency that is saddled with intervention, that is saddled with social responsibility, the first budget application should not be vehicle. The first budget application should be tractors in the villages. So those are the things we're talking about. Once you use the same model of driving this process, you are going to have the same result. And you cannot tell me you want to change this country by going through the same line of action that you have gone through over the years.
Mr. Raxi, are you telling me that the CBN is included in this plan, that the CBN will play a major role and 5,000 hectares already mapped out to be used? Are you saying CBN should not be carried along?
Let me tell you one of the biggest mistakes we make. Yes, of course CBN should be carried along, but what is the business of CBN in agriculture? If not to support the agencies of agriculture that are businesses with how agriculture should be funded. So let me tell you about 500,000 hectares, right? I am in Gati. It took me precisely, let's be very clear. If you get a bulldozer to clear land in high forest area, a bulldozer will probably not be able to clear more than 2 or 3 hectares a day. That is high. Let's say 1 hectare a day. How long will it take you to clear 500,000 hectares of farmland? If it's already clear, fantastic. If it's not already clear, don't go. So there are so many factors that come into clearing land. And as I'm saying, go to those who already understand. In this country, you have agricultural practitioners.
Mechanization.
Mechanization is important. But stop using companies whose only business is to buy tractors and hang them somewhere. Start using companies whose interest is also in the reproduction of food across the country. So what am I talking about? Like I said, there are all over this country. Whether you're talking about Abeokuta Farm Lab, or you're talking about Gati, Nasarawa State, in my place like Gati, NFGCS, or you go to the southeast, or you go to the south side. There are companies that are already producing food, processing food, that are involved in the process of agriculture, that have been doing those for the past 5 years, that have been doing that for the past 10 years. These are experienced entities. What stops you from funding the man that knows what he's already doing to continue doing it? But this time, government becomes a co-partner in the project. That way, CBN you'll not be sitting at CBN here and be saying we are committing 500 billion into agricultural intervention. And CBN will now set the agenda from Abuja here. And then when they invite the local farmers to come to Abuja, we are all sitting in ACs. Or when they want to come and see the farm, they are all driving there with ACs. They will never understand what the real Nigeria people need. That's exactly what I'm saying.
You are not saying government should not collaborate with mechanization companies, but they should do it with the right companies.
Simple.
All right. The government was talking about creation of nation commodity board. What do you think of this? And looks like a lot of government parastatals are involved. They're going to engage security architectures too to secure farmers, because security is very, very important. Talking of food security, and our farmers are not secure. Just like your place now, I kept wondering how you've been able to manage the farmers and the Fulanis in your place.
You see, in our case, we simply created what I call community integration. That is, government should spend money on community relationship. Okay? Because if there's no community relationship, if there's no integration in the community, even if you drop a battalion of the army there, it will not work. So what you do is spend money on vocational education, training people to live together, to live as one. That is the #1 objective when it comes to security. But of course, you're going to need security in the farms. And then let me come to the commodities board. Let us not put the cart before the horse. Yes, the way they put it, is it the horse before the cart, or whatever you call it. The cart before the horse. Commodities boards are important. Marketing boards are wonderful, right?
Probably it's because of pricing.
Yeah, of course. You are not going to change the issue of pricing overnight in Nigeria. You first have to produce. Excess production most of the time will lead to price, the reduction in price. So first produce. Now, why as fantastic as commodity board are, and I appreciate the fact that is coming on board, where are your grains reserve? Because of course, we talked about it there too. Where are the grain reserve? Now, if you look at countries where some of these things work, what do? They have strategic grain reserve. United States, China, India, Japan, they have strategic grain reserve. What strategic grain reserve does is you first and foremost improve productivity. As the farmers are producing, before they even get out of their farms, your government is buying it from them. And warehousing for two reasons, for processing and for export. So government becomes the key exporter of commodities, and government also becomes what? A part investor in processing. Now what you do is you fund private companies that have the capacity of processing what you produce. So you warehouse. They are not going to run short of grain. They are also not going to have challenges with their production process. So you are solving this challenge of lack of raw material for production. You're also solving the challenge of lack of access to raw materials. You're also solving the challenge of farmers not having access to markets. What are you doing? You give them the capacity to produce. Before you now talk about commodities board, my brother, make I tell you, if you like, set up the best commodity boards around. If the production is not enough, it will still be scarce. Because somebody will come, we buy, and Nigerians have a way of just changing the system. You know what I'm talking about. So get productivity right. Get rural Nigeria to work. Let the incentives, let the intervention focus on the real farmers. If you focus on the real farmers, if you stop taking the list from Abuja and start taking the list from the villages, if you start going to the villages and then using the local village head to run intervention in the villages, you are going to have access, more people will have access to the resources than when you do it from Abuja. So once you do that, then security will not become less of an issue. I often say that food security is our security is dependent on our food. If our local people have enough food to eat, what is going to happen? What is going to happen is that they're not going to get the mind, won't go fight. If the farms are making them earn a living, they will not have the reason to go and take 1,000. How much did they collect from Boko Haram? Sometimes most of them take Ramadan, take all this rubbish, and they take 1,000, 2,000, and then they're able to carry a gun and they go and fight. But if they have food to eat, if there's a job, the family are taken care of, their children are going to school, all in rural communities, nobody wants to leave the villages and come to urban area. The urban Nigeria is currently loaded with those who are not employable, with those who are not educated, with those who don't have an idea of what they are doing in the communities. And that is in urban Nigeria. That's why you see there's going to be increase in crime, there's going to be increase in security challenges in urban Nigeria. Fix rural Nigeria. Put security, community relationship. Like I said, not just agricultural commodities board, but the productive capacity of rural Nigeria. So that by the time the agricultural board are coming aboard, there's production to master abroad.
I'm still going back to your farm. You've been able to manage the Fulani people and the local farmers. And one time you told me that you have a different perspective what a ranch should be, what ranching is. Let the people know about this.
It's exactly what we talk about. We talk about emergency. The Fulani herdsman is not a problem in this country. We made him a problem. You know, man and animal. Man is an animal. So our migratory pattern are the same. During the dry season, right? Whether if you like, put a battalion, make a stretch along the north central. The captain in the north must head to the south. It is like Lagos. All of us go to Lagos and Abuja. Why? Because the opportunities in Lagos and Abuja are more than the ones I'm going to have in Warri, I'm going to have in Nnewi, or I'm going to have in Osun. So all of us go to where we feel that the opportunities are better. So man is always going to migrate. So what do? You design policies that are able to accommodate this migratory pattern that you're never going to change. How? The North Central Corridor, you create a North Central Corridor. All across the North Central Corridor, you build ranches, government-owned ranches. When Adogbe suggested planting grass, importing grass from Brazil, you laughed at him. But that was the solution. When National Livestock Transmission Program, Mother Buhari, talked about state-owning ranches, they said, oh, Fulanis will take over your land. Look, let's be very blunt with ourselves. When was the last time that any community lost their land to the Fulani in the last 50 years? It has not happened. Forget the challenges of insecurity, of killings here and there. So what you do is create that reserve along the north central belt and build government-owned ranches. And once you do that, as the cattle are migrating from the north, there's a place they're going to stay. You have schools, you have hospitals, like you have in Gati. What I'm telling you is exactly what I did in the farm. You have schools, you have hospitals, you have table tennis, you have football, you have all of them. So the cattle comes in, the man has a place he's going to stay in the farm. I'm telling you what I'm doing. He has a place he's going to stay. He has sport facilities. If you're sick, he has medical center. If the children are not want education, he has schools. Once you have all of this in a place, along the north central belt, what is going to happen? The challenge you think you have, you're going to solve. Now, the unity about the north central belt is that towards Benue, heading towards the south is wetter than when you're coming in from the north. So you build factories along that line whose primary responsibility will be to hay grass. So you hay grass from the south, companies, then you move them up north. You would have solved the problem. That's exactly the model we adopted as an estate. Eruga is not a problem. Eruga is not a challenge. We used to have, in the US those days, in the wide west, they had land issues, but they solved it. The American cowboy and the Fulani herdsman are one and the same person, like I've always been saying. But the American cowboy industry is $500 billion. The Nigerian Fulani industry, Fulanization, every time we check, Fulanization, Northernization, Hausanization. Is that how you solve your food problem? Is that how you make it work? So I change those dynamics. You don't talk about religion in the farm. You don't talk about ethnicity in the farm. You focus on productivity. And for 7 years now, we have not had one single farmer's header clash in a place stretching over 1,000 hectares. What does that tell you?
And you live there?
That is my house. I don't have any other house across the country. I don't have a house in Abuja here. I don't have a house in Delta. I don't have a house in Ondo State where my family are. That is the only place I have a house. And I'll be sleeping in the place. If I leave this studio now, I'm going back to the farm. When I was coming yesterday, when I was coming to your studio yesterday, I left the farm, I came here. As I'm going back to the farm. That is home.
Tell us about a little bit about your farm, the success story. I've been to your farm before. I saw palm oil, I saw rice, I saw some other things you produce. You seem to have a chain for your production. What is the secret so that Nigerians will know that there's really much to gain from going back to the farm?
It is not a success story, it's a battling story. Okay? You see, one of the biggest challenges we have had in agriculture in this country is we think short term. And I'm afraid, and we are talking to the team, that we should stop thinking short term when it comes to agriculture. Those palm trees you saw were planted 2020. This is 3 years. And they're just beginning to produce, right? Now imagine what happens. You have over close to 5,000 palm trees. Imagine what happens with the palm trees in the next 2 years, and what will happen over the next 10 years. In the next 2 years, what you're going to see is food production will begin. And with palm oil, within the next 10 years, those palm trees will give you in excess of 100 million every year from palm trees alone. So the dynamics is you need to build, or agriculture requires building. It requires capital expenditure. It requires funding. So one of the things that these interventions should do, sir, is what is the role of the central bank, for example? And Nigerian farmers should never be given facilities that are more than 5% per annum. Per annum, take note. They should not be less than 10 years, with a moratorium of a minimum of 3 years, so that the farmers can plan over the long haul. Productivity will improve with that. What we did is to build. So many Nigerians are not interested in building. And if you don't build over time in agriculture, you cannot sustain it over the long term. So you need rural infrastructure. Rural infrastructure helps you to stabilize the production process with regards to agriculture. Because all of our villages, sir, we don't make cars. We don't make cloth. Okay? Even cloth is agriculture. We don't make smartphones. We don't make television. What do we make? We produce what? Food. So what do? You evolve policies that support them. What the farm simply did was to look at the ecosystem. Now, over the past 5 years, we have been building. We're getting to the point of what? Of earning. Now, if you are not patient enough, you look at 5 years as a long term. But in agriculture, the foundation is usually 5 years to stabilize. And after stabilization, what then comes up is profitability. That's why we're telling the government that the emergency you are declaring should have as its core focus long-term survivability. Short-term shock absorber and what? Long-term survivability. So yes, you need irrigation. You need a short-term shock absorber. But then you need to begin to build the dams or support the dams that will hold water for the long term. You need funding, yes. You need short-term palliatives. But the palliative is what? What will be giving farmers 10,000 or 80,000? No, wala. Give them. But the aim should be what? What we have 500 million trees that will become economic trees and give us $25 billion over the next years, beginning for the next step 5 to 10 years. So it is short-term shock absorber, but long-term stability. But if it becomes short-term shock absorber for short-term enjoyment, then there will be nothing in the long term, and agriculture cannot work then.
Mr. Rexing Oye Mechi, have to stop here because we'll continue another day. Because I can see you are fully loaded because you are a certified farmer in all fields. Mr. Rexing Oye Mechi, thank you so much for coming.
It's an honor being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's the segment. My name is Abdul Yusuf. Thank you for watching. And that's renewed hope in practice for this week. On behalf of everyone, my name is Abdul Yusuf. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye and see you next week.